Before I start this dissertation, let me tell you a little about my background. I'm 82 years old. I have an engineering degree that includes steam plant design from Lafayette College. We've been in this business now for 37 years. At the age of 25, I was an aerospace engineer with Douglas Aerospace. And after that, I was a Honeywell engineer. And then I started my own business when I was 30 years old, manufacturing micro switches. In fact, to this day, there's one switch that if they want the switch, they have to come to me for it. The reason I say that, ITT went to Honeywell and asked them if they could make the switch. And they said, we can't make it in volume. We don't know how he does it. This switch operates within 1/40th of a human hair thickness, on and off. And we used to build 10,000 switches a day of that type. But then when I was a youngster, I had several radium treatments. And years for sinus trouble. And years later, the government issued a warning that if you'd had those radium treatments, you should go to a doctor and get checked out. Well, I knew there was a big problem, and at that time I was manufacturing switches, and I designed a water machine of my own design that recycled the water hundreds of times per gallon. It was a very rough machine, and I had no intention to get into this business. I was just doing it to save my own life, because I know that if you're going to take radiation out of the water, you've got to do it hundreds of times. Also, when I was at the Choate School, it's in Wallingford, Connecticut, I was reading a book. I was about 16 years old, about the alchemists. Excuse me. They're the fathers of modern chemistry. And in that book it said, rapidly heating and cooling water, quote, produces mystical qualities. Well, I never really thought much about that till years later, when I was trying to lower the steam velocity in a distiller by starting and stopping the boiling. And I did that. We got patents on it. We sent 5 machines to York Labs for testing, and they took 57.91, that was the local tap water, down to less than 0.07 parts per million. Now that's lower than the standard for pure water. If you use the lab standard for pure water is 0.1 parts per million. Do you know that none of these companies out there, not one of them, they advertise that they make pure water. Do you know not one of them make pure water? Not even one. In fact, if you divide that out, that's 827 times purer than the tap water. The closest competitor at that time, the largest selling, because we're just starting out, the water was only 9 times pure. And right after that was done, Corning called me. They invented the best lab distillers in the world. And they said to me, you know, your machine test at York Labs is better than ours. How did you do it? So I told them I do it by starting and stopping the boiling to lower the steam velocity. And they said, whoa, that's a great way to get rid of the organics. In fact, their chemists called it start-stop boiling. They coined that word. Now, I do have a problem. I'll go into it in a few minutes, but there's a man up there, he's a retired chemistry professor in Canada, who stated that bacteria cannot travel over with the steam in a distiller into the recondensed water. That is about the dumbest, stupidest statement you could make, especially coming from somebody that says they're a chemist. So I mentioned that to the chemists at Corning, and one of them said, if that was true, I wouldn't even have a job here. The reason is, in their lab distillers, they have baffles, all sorts of things that keep not only bacteria but pollutants from getting over into the ultra pure distilled water. Anyway, that's another situation that we can talk about in a minute. I've got a couple of items here. Let's see now. Actually, I'm not trying to be braggadocio, but I'm just trying to show you that I do have a background in this field. When I was a youngster, I invented a measuring device. It's still used all over the world. In fact, I remember in my parents' living room, Charles E. Wilson, who was chairman of the board of General Electric Company, and Roosevelt put him in charge of the War Production Board to get us into shape to fight the Second World War. Well, he was encouraging me on these inventions, and that's what people need, is role models. That's one of the reasons we support the Boy Scouts at our Shohola property. There's about 3,000 of them, and we support them because they're the future of our whole country. Now, I do have a couple of problems with people that lie to the public continually. You've got a tug of war going on between the alternative health field and the medical field. Now, there's one man who the government used to use as a qualified witness against people in the alternative health field. And he's got on his website, he's got probably a dozen websites with dozens of MDs, respectable MDs, who have strayed into the alternative health field. He puts them all down, any product with no test to back it up. See, that's one thing you got to remember about us. We don't talk about conjecture, what people think. We use the test, Doppler ultrasound on your skin, non-invasive. That's why it saves diabetics' feet. Your blood's 94% water. Or if they want to do some more tests to show that we've changed the properties of water, the tunneling scanning electron microscope, like they did at UCLA Medical Center years ago. Man taught at the medical school there, bought our Electron 5, our best machine, and then we sold a ton of them. Hundreds of them were MDs because he's so well known. But like he said, you can't argue with something you can measure. We can measure the ability of blood, 94% water, to go through a membrane into the cells to the extremities. Nothing's even close to your water. We knew that already anyway. The phone rings all the time. Diabetics crying with joy. You saved my foot. You saved my leg. And then they always say the same thing. Why do these companies all lie to you? If I'd listened to them, I would have lost my foot. See, these are all measurable qualities of our water that you can measure. Like I said, Doppler ultrasound, right through the skin. I can measure it. Regulators let us use that because it's non-invasive. Or the doctor at UCLA years ago, they used a tunneling scanning electron microscope to show how we've changed the properties of water. Now, there's a number of issues here. The man I was just describing, he's lost 40 lawsuits. The last one, the government said that, or the judge said, this man has no credibility. That's why the government doesn't use him anymore as an expert witness. And in fact, what that man has done, he's never done it to us, but I heard about it with other people that he does it. If they complain about it and, try to besmirch what he thinks is his good name, he'll tell them, well, if you give me $100,000, I won't do anything. That's the kind of person you're dealing with. Then that spread to a man in Canada. During the Vietnam War, a man who apparently got a degree in chemistry to avoid the Vietnam War went to Canada. And then, instead of going to McGill, or one of the top universities, he went to a new startup university. And there was about a half a dozen of them that used to be on, these professors that used to be on the internet, encouraging people to take drugs, smoking's good for you, and all that kind of thing. Well, the university has grown into a credible university. And here, not too long ago, They took that man off. He's a retired chemistry professor now, but they took him off the website, their website, and told him to remove a picture of the university, which he did, and also state that his chemistry courses, which are plagiarized, they do not endorse those chemistry courses. Well, he did that, and then finally they put him back on the university website, because after all, he did teach there. But anyway, those are the kind of people you're dealing with, and he's the man that stated earlier that I had mentioned, bacteria cannot travel with a Steve and a regular distiller. That's what makes me wonder about this man. How could somebody involved with chemistry, they use the stills just like Corning that manufactures them, and here their chemist telling me, I'm repeating a little bit here, if that was true, excuse me, we wouldn't even have a job here. Do you know how much has been spent in industry trying to lower vapor velocity? Billions and billions of dollars. So anyway, that shows the sheer stupidity in the industry. Not about 7 years ago or so, we had one man, he never bought a distiller from us. He calls himself Bludini. We know who he is, because he called our 800 number. We still have the records over 1,000 times. He's obviously a mental case. They must have let him out too early. Over a 2-month period. Now, we never did anything about it because our sales were booming. And we figured, well, as long as they spell the name right, people that are curious are going to call us. And the other people, we wouldn't want them as customers anyway. Now, I have a number of situations here that I'd like to discuss with you if you're still listening. Oncologists, no, I've complained for years. The standard water test, if you have your water tested, they don't tell you what's in the water. That's why oncologists know. Your ordinary distillers, filters, ozonators, reverse osmosis, pH ionizers, or whatever. They're all giving people cancer, MS, diabetes. It could be anything, depending on what happens to be in that water. So about 1.5 years ago, 2 years now, the Associated Press called me, and they did exactly what I told them, only they picked the city. They picked Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Now, you know Philadelphia tests their tap water. In fact, they're supposed to have good drinking water there. Guess what? 57 drugs in the drinking water. 41 million people didn't even know it. I'd be amazed if they didn't get cancer or MS or diabetes or anything else. Now, here's what's going on. If you see water go through one of those products I just mentioned one time, even 10 times, it's a waste of time. In fact, it can lead to your early demise. Let's put it that way. Here's what's happening. You got millions and millions of people taking drugs today. And if you have any doubts about it, check out Pfizer stock, which used to be, in fact, Warner Lambert. In fact, they bought out Warner Lambert. And those people are taking those drugs, plus the markers for whatever diseases they have in their bloodstream. That's why they're taking the drugs in the first place. And you don't find out about it till you get a blood test. So they flush their toilets into the groundwater. That water goes into an aquifer. Then it ends up in your spring water, your bottled water, your well water, and eventually it finds its way into the public water systems. So here's what we do. Here's the bottom line of what we do. You remember I mentioned earlier about at Choate School about the alchemists, the fathers of modern chemistry, quote, rapidly heating and cooling water produces mystical qualities. Well, when I was trying to lower the steam velocity, excuse me, that's how I came up with the design that I'm using. Here's what we've got. The machine weighs about 4 or 5 pounds. You've got a stainless steel pot, 8 inches diameter, 5.5 inches high, with a condensing coil in it. Attached to that tank is another tank, which is a little boiler with a boiler feeder tube that'll connect the two so the water can go back and forth. Now what we do, in the boiler, we froth to the surface your viruses, your bacteria, and by the way, if you look at our website under scientific data, you'll see a virus and bacteria destruction chart. I never counted them, there may be 25 or 30. Many of them can kill you. Each one's got a different destruction time. Do you know that none of those products I just named allow enough time to destroy them? You've got bacteria that survive boiling, that travel with steam in an ordinary distiller. The virus that causes hepatitis viruses are so tiny they'll go through anything. That virus will withstand over 30 minutes of boiling. So obviously those products aren't doing you much good, that's for sure. So here's what we do, bottom line, like I was going to say. In the boiler, we froth to the surface your viruses, your bacteria, your drugs, and your markers for whatever diseases happen to be in the water. Could be the CEA 125 marker for cancer, could be MS, could be diabetes, it could be anything. And then we hit it with high intensity, ultraviolet modular frequency and heat. But we don't do it once, and we don't do it 10 times. 3 times a minute, hundreds of times, that water goes back and forth from one to the other to make sure you got them all. The other thing is, if you constantly heat and cool water, like the alchemist said, of course they didn't have those, the equipment we have today to test it, but they knew that it was producing results. If you do that often enough, you'll break down the hydrogen bonds in water. Here's what this is all about. You've got H2. Oh, H2 is your hydrogen. There's a molecular bond angle between your 2 hydrogen atoms. To be exact, it's 104.5, but we'll round it off to 104 degrees. Ours is 114 degrees. We're just above hydrogen peroxide, which is 111, and just below ozone, that's 116. So it takes on the qualities of both. Now, if you kept heating that water, as you know, you'd make steam. Steam is 120 degree bond angle. But in ordinary distilling, what they're not telling you, remembering I have a degree in that field, the bond angle collapses to only 101 degrees. That's the worst possible water to drink, because you measure blood flow, like they said at UCLA years ago. That doctor that taught there, taught in the medical school, they can measure the ability of blood to go through a membrane into the cells to the extremities. That's why these people, they go to health food stores, buy all these products and everything, and they end up losing their feet anyway because they don't understand that. Or they've been lied to by people that sell water products. In fact, it's kind of interesting. This is an aside, really. I had a man call me not too long ago, and he owned 3 or 4 health food stores. And he said, and actually I've got one of his books here. It's like an encyclopedia if you want to read about alternative health and so on and so forth. He must have sold 1 million copies, I don't know. But he said, if you take a piece of paper, 8.5 by 11, I could write down all the health problems I've had over the years and the operations and so on. And I never got better till I got one of your machines. I'd never mentioned his name, of course, but he is very famous. But anyway, that's basically what it's all about. Now, what really put us over the top was in the 1980s. A wealthy landowner, Lakota, Mexico, got a machine, and the machines make 2 types of water, by the way. Light distilled, we call it, to differentiate from regular distilled, and light tap water. Light distilled will go up to about 12 gallons a day. Light tap water, though, if you're going to supply people drink, they drink light tap water. Turn up the flow a little bit. 10 gallons an hour, 240 gallons a day. That's the water you read about all the time. and you get the exact same health benefits. The thousands of wells have been done. Dole Foods with a 7-page contract. And that man down there in Mexico was running the water into his well, giving it away because he noticed a farm dog got better right away. People in the area getting better. So he bought several more, and there were so many Americans with cancer, MS, and diabetes and everything else going down there. The Washington Post heard about it and sent reporters down there and wrote that article that's on our website. Here's some quotes. 10,000 people a day, cures cancer, high blood cholesterol. And then it describes our patents. Read it. It's on the sidebar of the machine website. Here's a quote. The curative power results from the movements of water between two metal tanks. See, that's that heating and cooling that we do over and over and over again. Now, here's what's happened. Back in the 70s, in Japan, the Japanese government closed down about a dozen outfits selling these alkaline water machines because there were so many health complaints. And Hayashi, who developed that, it's nothing really. It's just a battery. You got an anode and a cathode. It'll make acidic water, alkaline water. Well, anyway, Hayashi, who developed that, recanted his own discovery. They're not telling him in the United States about that. And yet they sell the machines for as high as $4,200. And now Hayashi sells a hydrogen stick. Now, the reason I got a problem with those people, number one, in the 80s, they weren't even selling alkaline water machines over here. And yet they're trying to take credit for Lakota, Mexico, with the description of my patents in that original article that they removed so they could use it and claim it for themselves. These are the kind of people that you're dealing with. About 5 years ago, most people know it's a scam now, but years ago, or 5 years ago, people would call us. Same complaints they got in Japan. They get colitis. They can't digest their food. Crohn's disease, which is supposed to be irreversible. Pancreatic cancer, because the pancreas is working overtime trying to bring the pH of the stomach juices back to 1 to 1.5 pH, like battery acid. And in the worst case scenario, I had one man call me, 2 people. All of a sudden, the pancreas shut down. Boom, they dropped dead right on the spot. And also, none of the products make pure water. We've challenged all these companies. Let's see a test of your product, not a mail-in water sample you finagled. An actual water test showing you can make pure water. If you advertise it, let's see it. They don't have one. You've got a man down there in Florida about, let's see, what is it about water scams. Free report, $15 value. The man's selling an ordinary water distiller, and a few years ago, the machines have been recalled, not because they don't make pure water, for another reason. We won't even bother with that. But those are the kind of people you're dealing with. They're lying to the public. They won't do the test that we state. Use Doppler ultrasound. Show her she can make pure water. Let's see you do a well. Take 10 gallons of your best water and treat a well. They can't do it. Now that goes way back to Mayo. Actually, it was Mayo Clinic years ago. A man was there. We don't know who does it. We know they're not supposed to because cancer's a business. But somebody there keeps telling people about our machines. We certainly thank him for that. But anyway, this guy, he's a dairy farmer. And we subsequently got letters from him. Oh, we saved his life and blah, blah, blah. They told him to get a machine. And then he got me on the phone one day. He said, I'm in danger of losing my dairy farm. The milk production's way down. I told him, look, your problem is your well water. And here's what I told him. It's in the instructions now with the machine, because so many people have done it. Turn your well pump off. Pour 10 gallons of light tap water down your well and leave the pump off for 4 hours. Turn your pump back on Open up a faucet and let it run as long as 24 hours. So you don't want to shut it off too soon. You trap everything in the well. And I told him, you do that one time, it's going to last for a year or years. Now, in those days, they'd say, now, wait a minute. How could 10 gallons of water affect so much water? It sounds impossible. The reason is the power of hydrogen. H2O, right? You know that locked up in that water molecule, the power of hydrogen can power your car. We've learned to release some of that power of hydrogen. We know how to do it. And that's why it lasts for years. Well, anyway, he did that. The computer printout is on our machine website under scientific data showing the butter fat and so on for the whole year. Fortunately, at that time, the University of Minnesota monitored that well before and after in an outreach program. In fact, the bacteria count went from sky high to 0. And we put that in the literature in those days. And a young girl in Ohio with her father making the water did over 200 wells. In fact, her story, she wrote it up, is on our water website. And it's about state inspectors shaking their heads to why that works and so on. Then on the letterhead of LaSalle, Colorado, it's a town right outside of Denver, how it saved them millions and have to build a waste treatment plant. You can read all that, so I won't bore you with it. But anyway, that's what this is all about. And right after that, it was kind of interesting. Dole tested the light tap water for 9 months. What happened was they had used a Dow chemical for a problem they had in Costa Rica, El Salvador, Honduras, mold spores destroying the banana plantations. They used the Dow chemical, and unfortunately, thousands of workers injured, men sterile, costing millions in lawsuits. Well, a man in Vail, Colorado, heard about it from the state, and he started sending Dole our light tap water over a 9-month period, kept sending him samples of that water for testing. So finally they called him and they said, you know, to comply with the international food regulations, we have to know, what is in that water you're sending us? He said, there's nothing in the water, it's just water. They said, wait a minute, that's what our chemists have been testing for 9 months? It's only water? He said, yeah, you don't believe your own tests? So finally, Dole sent us a 7-page contract. Now, if you get a machine from us, drink a lot of the water at first. Get all your blood changed over to our water. In about 2 or 3 days, the urine's going to smell. Usually, light brown, light green. Now, that's from Sloan Kettering feedback we get, because it was Sloan Kettering that helped put us on the map. They asked if we could do the bulbs and transformers, so we went to Corning. That's how we got to know them. It looks like a little pen light, goes on the top of the boiler, and an aerospace firm builds the transformers for us. But anyway, if you've listened this far, I'd love to hear from you. I try to answer the phones when I can. I can't answer on 2 properties, but I do help out here. And I know you'd be very happy with our machines. We've sold, well, just because of that one article in the Washington Post, we sold over 100,000 machines because of it. In fact, we couldn't figure it out. Where were all these orders coming from? I was at an airport, and a man rushed up to me with half a jug of water, and he said to me, thousands of people are going down to Mexico to get your water. Well, I thought he was crazy. And then finally I heard about that article, and somebody sent it to me that had been written up in the Washington Post, and that's what led to all the sales we had. Now, that one guy, I may have mentioned him earlier, he doesn't have a machine, but he does blog on the internet, or he did. He called our 800 number over 1,000 times over a 2-month period. People have to realize this. The state just fined a company $300,000 because they pay thousands of shills to blog on these websites about how great their product is and to put down other products. Now, the problem is, I believe in the future this is going to lead to more government regulation, which we don't like or nobody likes. But that's what they're doing. They don't care. They're just making a fast buck, and that's what the story's all about. But anyway, if you like a machine or if you want to know more about it, just give us a call. You can even call Shahola, Pennsylvania. The man over there, brilliant guy, he retired in his early 50s. He was with Bell Labs, one of their scientists. And of course, Bell Labs invented everything. They invented transistors, your lasers, solar cells, and so on. In fact, he was telling me at lunch not too long ago, here a couple of weeks ago, that another scientist called him up and they said, yep, his hydrogen bond angle instead of 104 degrees is 113.8. In other words, we rounded off to 114 degrees. So there's no question, by increasing the solubility, you get better blood flow. Cleans your arteries so you don't get a heart attack. Look at that one guy on the internet, Jeff Tech. He had dark field microscope pictures of his blood before and after. Before, the red blood cells are clumped up. He's ready for a heart attack. 3 days later, blood flow back to normal. He gives us credit for saving him. And I had another man not too long ago call me. He had a full body scan done. That's where they see all the buildup in your arteries around your heart. Everybody's got some buildup. He called me very excited about the machine because there was no buildup at all. And the doctors kept asking me what he was doing. That's because of the greater solubility of the water, which a child could measure. Like I said earlier, they want to be fancy about it. Tunneling scanning electron microscope, measure it. That's what these companies won't do. They won't do any of the tests that we outlined for them, which shows right away, well, it's like an MD said to me. If they told the truth about water, you'd be the only people in business. So anyway, if you'd like to call us, we'd love to hear from you. And like Lowell Thomas said, so long until tomorrow.